What's up, wrestling fans? My name is Jose Ramos Jr. Welcome back to another episode of the J Area Podcast, and a lot to talk about in the last week of pro wrestling. Obviously, with Monday Night Raw airing tonight, the big talking point is the return of Rhea Ripley. Obviously, we knew eventually the honeymoon would have ended between Liv Morgan and Dominik Mysterio just when he let his guard down. Mommy returns. This has been a storyline that has been hit or miss with most wrestling fans. Some people are a fan of the whole romantic interest between Liv Morgan and Dominik Mysterio. Some people aren't. They think it's a little too hokey. They think it's a little too silly. Me, I fall right in line with being a fan of it, because I've always said that in pro wrestling, you can't take it too serious. You know, obviously, it's a combat sport. The action takes place inside the ring. But for me personally, and that's why I say me personally, because it is the J Area Podcast, it's my opinion. That's why you're tuning in to hear my opinion. The story makes the match. The match itself, the action that takes place in between the ropes, that highlights it. That elevates it. That's the cherry on top. But in the core sense of pro wrestling, I think it's the why. Why are these two fighting? What is the story? What is the conflict? Why are we combating in the ring? And the story between Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley, we've covered it to an extent on this podcast. If you want more information on that, please look through the archives in the J Area Podcast, where we highlight the evolution of Liv Morgan as well as the developing story within the Judgment Day. But with Dominik Mysterio, who I think is probably one of the hottest heels in the WWE, because he gets that reaction. He's able to elicit these amount of boos that drown out him speaking in the microphone, talking in front of a live audience. Never has been so difficult for a pro wrestler. That's the modern heat. Obviously, back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, you had those like Piper who were threatening to get stabbed. You had riots being formed. That's the modern heat. I think Dominik Mysterio is one of the best to get heat in the WWE currently. And that's just as a way to demonstrate the level of commitment that they've given to the story. But the story itself, between Liv Morgan and Dominik, a lot of people are wondering if it's going to blossom into some kind of romantic relationship. I think what a lot of people can agree on is that's not the case. I think Liv Morgan clearly is trying to destroy the Judgment Day. She said it right after WrestleMania 40. She is taking everything from Rhea Ripley. She took away her title, the World Heavyweight Championship, causing her to vacate it. She took away, for the time being, her livelihood because she was injured. She couldn't work. She couldn't do the one thing that she wanted to do as a profession. Then she won the World Heavyweight title, taking the title legitimately. And then she set her eyes on Dominik. But the ultimate domino is her family, the Judgment Day. And you saw, obviously, after Monday Night Raw went off the air, Liv Morgan in the backstage area, peeking through the curtain with a smile on her face, laughing. It's all a part of the plan. That's why at the end of that matchup, when Dominik Mysterio finally was able to get a win over his father, Rey Mysterio, pinning him for the first time in his life, in his career. Personally, I won't really count it. It's a tag team match. I remember I said that Dominik Mysterio would finally get a one-on-one victory against Rey Mysterio, possibly in Rey's final matchup. I think Dominik is the man to retire his father. And I think a common, fan theory among wrestling fans is that it will happen in a mask versus hair matchup. And I think that'd be a great way to end it. Rey can finally retire, and I don't mean like that he's not good anymore. Obviously, Rey Mysterio is one of the greatest of all time. But he's been doing it for so long, he deserves his rest, but he also deserves to do it as long as he wants to do. And if I'm Rey Mysterio, what better of an option to have retire you than Dominik Mysterio? He's not only giving his son that opportunity, but he's also kind of putting over the young talent, essentially. So they win the matchup in what was an interesting choice. I think a lot of people kind of picked up on the fact that would be the main event. Zelina Vega and Rey Mysterio taking on Liv Morgan and Dominik Mysterio. They kind of picked up on the idea, well, if that's the main event, something's going to happen, right? So when they win the matchup and they have this little mini celebration and Dominik and Liv are getting really close, part of me thought maybe Dominik kisses Liv. But then there's that also thought of what Damian Priest had said earlier in the night. He was on the phone with someone, when Finn and JD asking what was that about, and he said, I'm gonna let Dominik figure it out on his own. That's when we knew, okay, it's Rhea. So the pop that ensued when Rhea Ripley's music hit, I mean, we knew it was gonna be big. Rhea Ripley transcends the Judgment Day. I think she is the star of that group. For many months, years, we were questioning who was the real leader. Early on, it seemed like it was Finn. Then, in recent months, we thought it was Damian. But I think Rhea Ripley is the center of attention when it comes to the Judgment Day. She was the most dominant champion of the group. She is, arguably, the most marketable member of the group. Everyone loves Rhea Ripley. You see her and you can see that she's a star. So now with her return on WWE TV, I think the natural progression would be Liv Morgan. The question is, do we see a world title match? I don't see how you don't. Rhea Ripley never lost that World Heavyweight Championship. Liv Morgan's the champion. There's already a built-in story. There's already a built-in animosity between these two. Some people would say, well, maybe we hold off on it. Some people have even suggested some type of Dominik matchup where it's like Dominik and Liv against, I don't know, Finn and Rhea. It's a possibility. But I don't see how you can't go with Liv Morgan versus Rhea Ripley. The only issue would be the finish. Do you have Rhea win the title right then and there? Do you have Liv Morgan retain the title, beating Rhea in her first match back? Because I don't see Rhea losing her first match after injury, especially given the level of support, the hype that is surrounded around Rhea Ripley over the course of this last few months while she was nursing her injury. Rhea Ripley's return is huge, because we're starting to see some of these athletes, some of these wrestlers that were injured now returning. We saw Seth Rollins return. We have Rhea Ripley. Roman should be coming pretty soon. Charlotte is off somewhere rehabbing her ACL. She should be coming back soon. CM Punk coming back soon. We're now in the momentum swing for the WWE, and some people would say that in the summer months, the months after the WrestleMania, it's the toughest months for the WWE because it's that lull, right around the Survivor Series, heading into the Rumble, when it starts to become clearer what's WrestleMania going to be looking like, that's when they pick up. But the WWE has not lost any steam. They have managed, even with all the injuries that they have sustained, they have managed to continue that momentum. And that's what Rhea Ripley's going to have to rely on when she faces Liv Morgan, although she hasn't had a match since WrestleMania 40, and a great match against Becky Lynch. That level of momentum, that support, that's what's going to carry her through this next run in her career. And I'm all for it. I'm looking forward to it. But the Judgment Day aren't the only group that is causing, turmoil and havoc in a different sense. On SmackDown, we have the Bloodline. And my first initial thought, Jacob Fatu. What an impression he made on Friday Night SmackDown. Taking out Grayson Waller, Austin Theory, the tag team champs DIY. The move set that he was able to present in that attack on SmackDown. I'm watching it live and I'm thinking, wow, they're actually letting him go for it. You saw the moonsault, the springboard moonsault. You see, again, I've seen the comparisons of him and like Umaga. The ferocity, the strength, the fierce, the power that Jacob Fatu has. It's hard not to, you look at Jacob Fatu. It's hard not to see that, hey, this guy's going to be a star coming out of the Bloodline. All respect to the Gorillas of Destiny, Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa. Obviously, Solo Sikoa, who's the new tribal chief, apparently. But Jacob Fatu steals every scene that he's in. There was a moment in that promo following the attack when Solo Sikoa began speaking about the true tribal chief, Roman Reigns. And upon mentioning the name, you could see the camera, is following Solo as he's walking, pacing throughout the ring. And there's a brief moment where when he mentions Roman, it's fixated on Jacob Fatu's eyes. And we get a little zoom, and then Solo walks right back into frame. That was an interesting choice. There's theories. What if Jacob Fatu is a double agent and is actually working with Roman? I don't know. But with WWE, these last few years, last year and a half, we'll say, you can say they're very deliberate about their choices, specifically with the camera work. They want you to focus on certain things. They want you to pick up on little details. I don't think that was a mistake. And it's very interesting because you could also see the parallels. Jacob Fatu, upon debuting, we've seen the parallels between the original Bloodline and the current state of the Bloodline. Jacob Fatu falls in line with that Solo Sikoa role. The muscle. The one that keeps everyone in check. He wreaks havoc, causing chaos. Who's to say? Obviously, it's still too early, but who's to say Jacob Fatu doesn't want to be the new tribal chief? Solo Sikoa, in comparison to Jacob Fatu, I'd have to side with Jacob Fatu on who has more presence, on who has more of a menacing aura around them. You talk about loose cannon. You talk about someone who's unpredictable. That's Jacob Fatu. I'm so happy with Jacob Fatu and how he's, grown over the last couple weeks. And it's just the tip of the iceberg. Moving on in that segment, we knew it was going to lead to a confrontation with the WWE champion, the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. And what happened? Well, before we even get to that, it's pretty much all but announced. SummerSlam, Solo Sikoa versus Cody Rhodes for the WWE Championship. It's elementary. We knew that's what's going to happen. Ever since that pinfall had occurred at Money in the Bank, we knew Solo Sikoa at one point was going to get a title shot. Now, with that being said, Randy Orton's inclusion is something to keep an eye on, because there's always been that rumor that we're going to get a Randy Orton versus Cody Rhodes matchup, which I think is instant money. That's printing money, because you're looking at how the story of when Cody Rhodes started in 2007, who was the first person he feuded with? Randy Orton. Then you go 2008 to 2010, he was with Legacy with Randy Orton. As the Intercontinental Champion in 2011, when he donned the mask, one of his feuds was against Randy Orton for that IC title. Their careers are intertwined. In 2013, the Authority cost Cody Rhodes his job. Randy Orton's in the Authority. It's intertwined. And now Cody's at the top. Randy Orton vowed, so as long as you have that championship, he says, I got your back. Keep in mind, Randy Orton's the Viper, and snakes, they'll turn on you. But for the time being, we see that he is aligned with Cody Rhodes. The attack. This is why I love what the WWE is doing, in the last year. Everything counts. Everything matters. Randy Orton viciously attacked by the Bloodline, and Cody Rhodes forced to watch. There was a moment where he's tied up in the ropes, and Solo Sikoa, again, forcing him to watch his friend, his mentor, go through this pain. And you can hear Cody yelling, you don't want him, take me. That's admirable. I love that. Because Cody knows this beef is between you and I. Don't include Randy. And again, it shows that level of respect that he has for Randy. But because Randy's... essentially, Randy could be written off of TV for a little bit. I don't think it's going to be like a month. Maybe out for a couple weeks. Maybe we'll see him on the SmackDown before SummerSlam. But for the time being, I think Cody's riding this solo. No pun intended. But then you also have to consider the fact of Jimmy Uso. Jimmy Uso's been out since, after WrestleMania, when we saw the debut of Tongaloa. Or excuse me, Tama Tonga. When is he going to return? And it begs the question, Paul Heyman's been out. What about Roman Reigns? I think we get Jimmy Uso first. I think Paul Heyman comes with Roman. That's the only... Because if I'm Paul Heyman, why would I return if I don't at least have some kind of help, some kind of insurance policy to protect my assets? Paul Heyman's coming with Roman. Whether that's at SummerSlam, whether it's the SmackDown after SummerSlam, we'll have to wait and see. But the Bloodline story has certainly been picked up. Certainly has kicked it up a notch. There was a little time there in between where we're like, okay. Then Jacob Fatu came. And now the inclusion of Cody Rhodes back against the Bloodline. Randy Orton getting decimated. Paul Heyman getting decimated. We're back. We are back. I'm looking forward to the matchup. It'll probably be the main event of SummerSlam. I don't see anything else. I don't see anything else. It should be Cody versus Solo, the WWE Championship. We know there's going to be some kind of interference. Come on, it's a Bloodline matchup. Whether it is Roman, Jimmy, Randy, Kevin, there's going to be interference. That should be the closer. But I mean, you look at how WWE has managed to increase its depth, certainly with the Bloodline. You look at how they've managed to bring Tama Tonga and Tongaloa. You already know how I feel about Jacob Fatu. What a beast, man. But that doesn't stop there. Obviously, on the channel, you would have noticed that I did speak about Stephanie Vaquer for a little bit. And seeing that she is now signed with the WWE, a lot of controversy around that signing. Stephanie, who had just been with AEW, she was competing at Forbidden Door against Mercedes Moné. Great matchup. It was only like the second or third matchup that I seen of Stephanie. And instantly I knew, oh, she's good. I'm a fan. And it's like I said, I always try to be transparent with you guys. This is just friends talking about pro wrestling. I'm not going to act like I'm an expert. I'm not going to throw on some kind of facade and say, hey, I knew she was going to be great. No. I'm learning about her still. But off of those first few matchups. And of course, I'm a little biased because she is a part of the, Hispanic community. A little biased there. Everyone assumed she was going to be signing with All Elite Wrestling. She had done her time with New Japan, had done her time with CMLL, and they're already partners with them. So we're thinking, okay, I mean, it makes sense. It's a natural fit. It's a natural progression. But it's like we said in that previous video. The moment you started seeing her, being dropped from these events or no showing these events, that was a telling sign. Because if you're already working with AEW, they were going to be okay with you making those dates, with making those appearances. The one company that doesn't is WWE. Those guys, once they have you signed, hey, you're with us now. They don't want to risk anything, injuries or any mishaps. They don't want to risk that. So that began the chatter of like, she's WWE bound. And then before you know it, Shawn Michaels tweets out, welcome to the family. And it's like, I guess it's official. And then we noticed that there's a tour in Mexico. So naturally, I'm thinking, okay, that's a pretty ideal spot to introduce her to the crowd, like, hey, welcoming our new signing. And lo and behold, she already has a match. She defeated Isla Dawn in a one-on-one contest. But that's just amazing to think, 2 weeks ago? That Stephanie was competing on AEW television, and now she's already, competing in the WWE. And there was a video that was just uploaded, or shortly after her matchup, saying NXT, see you soon. And I think that's an obvious response. I think NXT is the spot for her, not only to develop her craft and adapt to the WWE style. It is a much different style than other wrestling promotions. It's a little more showy. It's sports entertainment based. You know, they like to go personality big, but also given the language barrier. Her first language is Spanish, and I think it's going to give her an opportunity to learn the WWE way, get comfortable, you know, with everyone, the system, if you will, and it'll naturally progress her to the main roster. I don't anticipate her being, you know, in developmental for too long. Look at a girl like Asuka, who was there, what, maybe a year and a half? And like the majority of that, she was the champion. The women's roster in WWE is stacked. And it's hard to argue that they don't have the best women's roster. Specifically, you know, if you were to just concentrate on the NXT roster, just the potential. And as I mentioned, obviously, if you haven't checked out that video, please go ahead and do yourself a favor. Check out that video about WWE signing Stephanie Vaquer. You haven't even seen Julia yet. Julia has not debuted on NXT. Obviously, we know she's signed. We saw her at NXT Stand and Deliver back in April. Her wrist is now seemingly healed. She just competed this past weekend and should be making her way to WWE fairly soon. WWE is on a roll. They're on a roll. Between all these signings, between Stephanie Vaquer, very impressed with their progression. And it's great to see so much diversity, not only in the sense of the Hispanic community, again, I'm a little biased, but also the presentation of the women. And you talk about that, go to the flip side. All Elite Wrestling, their closing angle at AEW Dynamite, the finals of the women's bracket of the Owen Hart Foundation tournament, saw Mariah May winning and earning a championship opportunity against her friend, her mentor, Toni Storm, for the AEW World Women's Champion at All In. And we all knew eventually there was a turn that was going to happen, but the closing shot of Mariah May holding up a bloody Toni Storm is an image that I think, again, whenever AEW produces like a highlight reel, that's an image that could be there. That should be there, really. And then on top of that, you look at the irony of watch the shoe, obviously one of the famous lines of Toni Storm. And there was the very same shoe that Mariah May had used to open up the wound of Toni Storm, causing her to bleed even more heavily. It was done so well. It was done so well. And you got so much emotion out of Toni Storm and Mariah May, almost with a blank expression for the majority of the attack. By the way, big props to Luther for the huge bump he took off the stage through the tables. Because I don't think we give Luther enough credit. The little minute details, the characteristics that Luther does as their handler, as their butler, whatever you want to call him, have been great. Beforehand, before this gimmick, he was really doing nothing. And so seeing him with Mariah May and Toni Storm, adding that comedic element, keep in mind, and he doesn't speak. He never says a word. But it's just the body language, the facial expressions. Big props to Luther. But I'm looking forward to Mariah May versus Toni Storm. And it goes back to how I opened up this episode of the podcast, where it's about story. We've seen these two women have a partnership for nearly a year now. And seeing the progression, seeing how Mariah May has really taken to Toni Storm. We all knew eventually it was going to lead to a feud, but it's just the manner in which it was executed. That is something that is very important, because even if you can see it coming, when it's done so well, you have to give it props. And AEW, again, in a previous episode of the podcast, I had mentioned, is finding their footing. I think they finally have found their groove again. There was a time period there where they were kind of, hit or miss. But I think now they've found their groove, and I'm so happy for it. Because whenever you have multiple outlets of pro wrestling doing well, it's how can you go wrong? I've always said this comparison, I look at it as a buffet of pro wrestling. You like a little bit of this, I want a little bit of that, want a little bit of this, don't want that, but I'll take this. Everything's firing on all cylinders. Their story telling has improved, because you look at AEW and their presentation, it's always been about the wrestling aspect, about what's going on in the ring. Their slogan is AEW, we're the best wrestle, but I think their story elements have improved, certainly within the last year. But one of the main storylines that has really been honed in on and focused is that of the Hangman Adam Page. Adam Page, I think there's an argument to be made. Me personally, I think it is, but I think it could be argued it is the best story that AEW has. Since its inception in 2019, when introducing All Elite Wrestling, we began with this idea that Hangman could be the face of the company. We knew the Young Bucks, Cody, Kenny, those guys were top billing, but 3 out of 4 of them were more hands-on with the EVP stuff. I believe Kenny Omega was also an EVP. But Hangman Adam Page, that left him off to the side. And he vowed in that first press event that he would win the World Championship. Granted, he said he would be the first World Champion. That did not happen. But the intent remained the same. He was going to win singles gold. The main singles gold. I won't dive in too much into it, obviously, because go ahead and check out the video on Hangman Adam Page's story that I have on my YouTube channel. I dive into why I think he is the best story that AEW has told. But you look at just within the last year, Hangman Adam Page seemingly has had the crowd turned against him. He had a real bitter feud with Swerve Strickland. He invaded the man's home. He made it personal. And the fans began to turn on Hangman, siding with Swerve. Granted, it was at a point in time where Hangman was kind of losing momentum, and Swerve was the fresh, new, hot face. So of course they're going to side with someone new. But I love the continuity that AEW has established with Hangman, because obviously that's something that sticks with you. I fought tooth and nail for this company. I was here since day one. Where was Swerve? He was out rapping in NXT. So naturally, he's going to feel some type of way about the new treatment that the fans have been giving him. His now main priority was to win that tournament, and he didn't. He wanted to beat Swerve Strickland, win the world title, kill 2 birds with 1 stone at All In, but that's not the case. So it begs the question, what's next for Hangman? Where does that leave us with Adam Page? Well, it's clear he doesn't want to, because you can see that hesitancy. But he will be joining the Young Bucks, Kazuchika Okada, and Jack Perry in the Blood and Guts matchup. Team Elite versus Team AEW. Who's on the other side? Well, as of right now, as of this recording, we know that it's going to be Briscoe, Swerve Strickland. There's your key element. Hangman gets his hands on Swerve. The story is not done. Although Swerve is facing Bryan Danielson, which we will get to in a moment, the story remains Hangman Adam Page. And you know there is resentment. You know there is also, a mutual sense of hatred from Swerve to Hangman. I don't know where that leads. Could it be Full Gear? It very well could be. But I could also see them stretching this out to Double or Nothing. I do think they have that capability. They certainly have the roster to do so. I think it's going to be a one-off when it comes to Hangman and the Elite. You guys got me this favor and put me in the tournament. Didn't work out. I'll give you this one. I'll be on Team Elite. We'll be in Blood and Guts. I'll give you this one. But then after that, where does Hangman go? I think his main focus will still be on the world title. So I'm curious to see how they move forward in his character work. Obviously, in ring-wise, we know Hangman is one of the best AEW has. But character-wise, that's why. It's always the why that I look for in wrestling. Why should I invest my time? Why should I care? Why should I cheer? Why should I boo? So keep an eye on Hangman Adam Page. That is certainly a name to watch for in AEW. But as I mentioned, Bryan Danielson was the one to emerge victorious in the Owen Hart Foundation's men's side of the tournament, earning a championship opportunity at the All In event against AEW World Champion Swerve Strickland. Is this it? Is this the last run for Bryan Danielson? We know that he had said he would be seeking out retirement pretty soon. The clock's winding down. Will AEW cash in on a Bryan Danielson championship run? I don't see how you can't. Bryan Danielson, arguably the best wrestler on the roster. I know you have fans of Will Ospreay, you have Swerve Strickland, Kenny Omega when he is available, MJF, but I think objectively, and also in the grand scheme of their careers, Bryan Danielson is one of the greatest to ever do it. Whether it's in AEW, WWE, Japan, Ring of Honor, you just take his whole career. You take all his ability, and Bryan Danielson, I think, goes down as one of the greatest of all time. With that being said, he's never won singles gold in AEW, and I don't want to hear people saying, well, he won the Owen Hart tournament and you get this title belt. I don't count that. It's a great accomplishment, don't get me wrong, but I don't count that as singles gold. It's not recognized as a championship that is, defended on TV. What about a world championship? And it doesn't have to be a lengthy championship. Maybe get him to full gear. Maybe just get him a few months, World's End. But I think that is something that would be so instrumental to AEW. Swerve Strickland, I think we've now hit this point in his reign where he's a made man. He can now drop this title and still be, perceived as one of the top tier talent in AEW. I'm confident in saying that. In fact, we talked about Hangman Adam Page. What if he were to cost Swerve the title, allowing Bryan to win? And I could see Bryan being the ultimate babyface and saying, hey, you know what? That was unfair to you. Let's run it back at All Out. Which is I believe a week after All In? Possibility. But how can you not? We know it's the final countdown for Bryan Danielson. We're running towards the end of his illustrious career. What better way than to cap it off with a world title? And we've seen it been done. Look at earlier in the year. Sting finished his career off as a tag team champion. Finished with the win, when traditionally speaking, you're supposed to go out on your back. You're supposed to put over the future talent. You keep the tradition, the time-honored tradition. When you're retiring, you lose. I could very well see Bryan Danielson doing that, just because he seems to be that kind of guy. It's also been reported he doesn't want a world title match. And quite frankly, Bryan Danielson's the type where he doesn't need it. Bryan Danielson doesn't need the AEW World Championship. It would be nice. I, along with other fans, I hope, would be in favor of it, to see Bryan Danielson once again have a run at a world title. But I think this is an instant where the title needs Danielson. Not to say that the title isn't great with Swerve. I think Swerve is doing a phenomenal job. But when you look at the long list of champions, when AEW, God willing, it's still around in 30 years, you want to look at the legacy it's left. Chris Jericho, Jon Moxley, Kenny Omega, Adam Page, CM Punk, Samoa Joe, MJF. Obviously, I'm leaving some names off that list. You add Bryan Danielson to that, that's a who's who of champions included in that list. If it was me booking it, I think I'd crown Bryan Danielson. I think I would crown Bryan Danielson for sure. AEW, like I said, has found its footing. WWE, still on a roll. And I hope it never slows down for either company. I want both of them to be fruitful. I want both of them to be successful, because that's when wrestling is at its best. That's what's so exciting about this time. That's why I hop on the podcast. That's why I hop on YouTube and I create those videos for you guys, because I just want to talk about it all. I want to share my thoughts with you guys. I want you guys to share your thoughts with me. So with that being said, please make sure to comment down below, what are some of your favorite aspects of pro wrestling in this moment? Do you think Bryan Danielson should be crowned as the AEW World Champion? When do you think Jimmy Uso and Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman will make their respective returns. And I don't know. Are you guys excited for SummerSlam and All In as much as I am? Because it's been one hell of a summer for wrestling, and I hope that momentum carries on into the fall, and so on and so forth. But with that being said, of course, my name is Jose Ramos Jr. This has been another episode of the J Area Podcast, and I will see you all in the next one.